Meow, welcome to the PodKat. This is my pod and I am Kat. For today's audience question, I would love to get some feedback from the listeners about what questions you have about the virus. So I've compiled my questions and I have a guest today who can help us separate fact from myth. Nova!
Hello.
Hi, girl. I had a lovely chat with your sister on our second episode. Thanks for taking the time to come set the record straight and give your perspective. So would you tell us who you are and where you are?
Of course. First of all, I'm really happy to be on here. Very excited. So my name is Nova Tevi. I'm a current graduate student here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm getting a master's in public health and also a master's in public affairs.
Cool. So what has, in a short sense, become your new reality as far as what's your day-to-day life now? Is your university work suspended? What's happening?
Yeah, so I think it was about a week ago, my university, they decided to make all classes online. The first deadline for that was April 10th, but they have now decided to have only online classes for the rest of the semester. Luckily for all of the instructors and professors here, this past week was spring break, and so they were able to kind of figure out how they're going to be doing that for all of the courses students are taking. For me personally, as I said, last week was spring break, but I was here at home. I was working remotely for my job, and I've just kind of been trying to social distance myself, try not to go outside the home as much as I can, only to get groceries and whatnot. Sometimes take a walk, but it's definitely different. I'm used to walking around campus, going to the library to study and such, and I'm just kind of stuck at home. So it's been kind of weird for sure.
Are you experiencing any financial changes at the moment? Are you affected in that way?
No, I'm very thankful that I'm not experiencing that. I have a graduate assistantship here at University of Wisconsin, and I have a job that allows me to work remotely. So I'm still able to work and get all of the money that I really need. So I'm very thankful for that.
That's wonderful to hear. Are you seeing a reaction in the community there as far as, have you been to a grocery store? Have you noticed traffic, and are wild animals returning from nature?
So I did actually go to the store this morning. I had to get some food, some fresh produce and whatnot. And I've noticed that many stores here now have senior citizen hours, which basically allows people who are 60 years or older to come to the store early before everybody else does, so that they can minimize their risk, which I think is really creative and a really great idea. So I made sure that I went after those hours, but even when I was there at, 8 a.m., there was more people there than I thought there would be, for sure. But luckily, the shelves were stocked. There was plenty of food to get, and so that was really awesome. But also, it was surprising that the roads were pretty much empty. It's really weird for the roads to be empty here in Madison, Wisconsin, which, is the capital of Wisconsin, so you would think it would be kind of bustling, but no, it was actually pretty empty, so it's kind of weird.
So I'm just shocked hearing different reactions of communities, because it's hard when you're own home. When you are in your own home, you're kind of like, this is what everyone's going through, right? But the fact that there are places having less of a reaction is interesting to me. I don't want people out panicking, but it's amazing to me, places that haven't yet been affected. But I am here to learn, and my virus knowledge comes mostly from watching Outbreak in high school. So I know that we have immunities that protect us, and I've heard that this is a problem. I'm sorry, COVID-19 is a problem because it's a previously unseen strand or something. So give me some education on what you know right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think to start with, many people have been calling this virus coronavirus, right?
Okay.
But I think it's important to know that coronavirus is actually, you can think of it as a species of viruses all by itself. So just like how you have, animal species and stuff, there are also species of viruses. So coronavirus is basically the name of the species. And so when there's actually many other different types of viruses within that species. So if you recall SARS, SARS is actually a coronavirus. MERS is a coronavirus. And actually, many common colds are actually part of the coronavirus species as well. So when we're talking about coronavirus today, it's really about talking about COVID-19 because that is the specific strain, as we call it, of that coronavirus species. If that makes sense.
Does coronavirus, someone told me that it meant it could be transferable from animals. Is that in any way what this means, or is that not related at all?
No, I would say that's right. So in a sense, I mean, we know that COVID-19 most likely jumped from an animal. We're kind of thinking of bats. I'm pretty sure SARS and MERS is also transferred from animals. But coronavirus, in terms of the actual name of it, the reason why they call the species coronavirus is because when you look at the virus in an electron microscope, they kind of look like they have crowns on them.
Oh, okay.
And that's why we call them coronavirus. Kind of a fun trivia fact for you.
Interesting. I'll come back to the animal question later, but I had heard people were like, oh, it's similar to bird flu or swine flu, where it came from an animal, and that was what you were talking about, like family of viruses means?
When we talk about family of viruses, we mainly talk about where they infect, and also what different parts of the virus, what different parts make up the virus. So I don't want to get too specific, but there's DNA viruses, there's RNA viruses, there's enveloped viruses. So there's different types of viruses, and we try to group them based on their structure and where they infect, not necessarily where we get the virus from necessarily. So
okay.
Like swine flu and bird flu, they're still within the flu, so it's still within that. I think people just put swine flu and bird flu, because of that's kind of like where the initial transfer was from animal to human. But we don't usually, in terms of virology, we normally group viruses together based on their structure.
Okay, so
if that makes sense.
Yes, I mean, I do want to pass my midterm, so lay it on me. But based on what you know right now, what is going on with COVID-19? What does it do to us? Why should we be worried?
Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, there's some things that we do know, but at the end of the day, we don't know everything because it is a new virus and it's behaving differently than other viruses within the same family. What we do know is that it's a virus that infects the lower respiratory tract, which basically means it infects your lungs. And that's a big deal, especially if you have asthma or other respiratory conditions. That kind of makes you more vulnerable and at risk because of that. We also know that the virus, COVID-19, transmits human to human or surface to human. Usually, if it's human to human, it's from respiratory droplets, which basically means it's coming through the virus. Respiratory droplets basically means that when you cough or you have a heavy breathing, you're basically coughing up some of the virus from your lungs where it's already infected, and those droplets basically go to another human, and that human can either breathe that in or have it on like their hands, and their hands go to their face and stuff. That's usually human to human transmission. If it's surface to human transmission, obviously somebody can cough or heavy breathe on a surface, and then somebody can come along, touch that surface with their hand, let's say, and then touch their hand to their face, and that definitely gives the virus an entry point into the body and start infecting them. So that's what we know about this virus from my knowledge, and of course this is a evolving story. Essentially, we're trying to get more research on it, but from what I can see, this is kind of what's happening here.
So do you know especially since this is what you study, was there any indication that, because you know how people say like, oh, the 100-year flood, like we're due for another flood. Is that a thing that people talk about, that like we were due for a virus or that we weren't taking precautions?
I don't think, it's really hard to predict any kind of epidemic or pandemic to this scale. I wouldn't say people said that we were due for one. I think there's more like there are underlying contributions that could make a pandemic easier to happen. And I think we knew that. So, for example, if you're talking about climate change, right, that's a huge factor that can increase any infectious disease. And also just like our healthcare system, we know it's not really up to speed on helping any pandemic like this. And so there's definitely things we can look back on that make us seem like, oh, well, it's not surprising that something like this came along. But I wouldn't say we were due for one or something like that.
Okay. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like we might not have been prepared for the number of people that could be affected at a time. And that's country by country as far as how many hospitals they had and that sort of situation. But I was just curious with it seems like there's, every few years, again, when I was in college, my freshman year, it was, I think, bird flu it was swine flu my freshman year, 2009. But yeah, it just seemed like, oh yeah, there's always something every few years. People get vaccinated or a few people get sick. But like, I remember I had a friend who had swine flu and she was okay. So why is this in particular extra dangerous?
I think that's a great question. And I think this is kind of the confusing part, right? Especially when you hear comparisons of COVID-19 to the flu, right? But now they may share similar symptoms, but at the end of the day, we know a lot about flu. We know a lot about its replicating pathway. We know where it infects. We're able to create vaccines for it very quickly. Flu is a very highly studied virus. Now, what makes COVID-19 different is that it's not as studied as much, right? Because it just kind of came along. And what makes it so interesting is that, and probably why it's become such a pandemic, is one, it spreads very easily, right? So it's able to go from human to human or surface to human very quickly. But also, and this might sound, a little, cringeworthy, I guess you could say, but the fact that COVID-19 has a relatively low mortality rate, now it's definitely higher than the flu mortality rate, which is just the amount of people that die from the virus. I believe flu has about a 0.01% mortality rate. COVID-19, I believe, has about a 4%, if I'm not mistaken. So it's definitely higher than the flu, but it's not nearly as deadly as, let's say, Ebola or measles. So what does that mean? That means that the virus isn't basically killing off its host as quickly. So it's able to replicate more and replicate faster without kind of decimating the options that the virus can have as a host.
And then, yeah, and if a person has it and they're not dying, then they're out spreading it to more people. And so that's exactly. So like in the movie Outbreak, people took it so seriously because it worked so fast. Like people were dead so quickly once they got it, but also like the symptoms were so terrifying. It sounded, I mean, it basically was Ebola, where it kind of like liquefied your organs. And so in the movie, it's very tense because you can see people like dying very quickly with it. And so I was wondering about this, like if we had video of someone who had it, what would they be experiencing? Or is it just like you're more susceptible to pneumonia and other things when you have it? Or if you're immunocompromised, then, but like if you were a relatively healthy person, what kind of symptoms would this specific COVID-19 be exhibiting in you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So in terms of the symptoms that would alert, like your doctor per se, that you should get tested for COVID-19, right? Those symptoms are fever, coughing, shortness of breath, those types of symptoms. But I've read some personal stories of people who have had COVID-19 and they're now recovering from it. And from what I can tell, it's frightening, just because they are basically unable to breathe very effectively. So, if they get up out of bed, it takes them a while because they have to break in order to be able to take a full breath, right? And some can't even take a full breath, right? I mean, it's infecting your lungs, right? So if you want to think about bronchitis or pneumonia, right, it's probably that, if not worse, in terms of the symptoms, along with everything else. And you did bring up a good point too, right, where if you get this virus, you're probably going to be more susceptible to other things, and that's exactly right. If you do end up getting COVID-19, you might be susceptible to other viruses or bacterial infections, because your immune system is working so hard against the one virus, but if other things are coming in, then the immune system kind of gets overcrowded, overwhelmed, and it's not able to do everything all at once. But so it's scary. And again, right, if you think about if you have asthma or a respiratory condition, it could be even more debilitating. Think about not being able to breathe as easily as you do now, right? I mean, that's a scary thing. It's very scary.
Yeah, I had bronchitis in college, and I remember waking up in the shower because I had passed out because I didn't go to a doctor and I couldn't breathe. And I was like, this is fine. I can go through with this. But yeah, when you can't breathe, it is like, last year I had a severe lung infection where, again, I passed out. Apparently that's what my body reacts. But I remember I passed out at work and my boss was like, to the hospital now. And I was like, I'm fine. But yeah, when you can't breathe and you're really dizzy, and I've never had pneumonia, thankfully, but that is really scary. I wanted to ask who you think that people should listen to right now.
You're coming at me with some great questions. I really appreciate them. This is great. So, I mean, first and foremost, I think the WHO, which is the World Health Organization, is doing a really great job at not only giving information about what the whole world is facing, but also giving recommendations. And they actually even have a section on their website that basically is like Mythbusters for COVID-19. And so if you ever want to know what's a myth and what's a fact, they have a whole, webpage on that, which I think is great. So I think they're definitely a great resource. Also, the CDC has some great things as well. They have guidelines, of course, and they even, they have really good information about how the virus spreads and what you can do on the individual level and what local communities can do to help stop the spread. And, also your local public health department. This is kind of their bread and butter in a sense, right? I mean, there's normally, different divisions, so to speak, within those departments just for infectious diseases and outbreaks, right? So I know here, public health for Madison-Dane County, which is where I live, they're sending out things, seems like every hour about resources, what to do, and they also give you updates on how many confirmed cases there are and stuff like that. So definitely your local public health department is a great resource, and then your state health department is also really good because most of them have a public health branch as well. So any of those things are really, really good. I think it's hard to rely on other sources full-heartedly. I think, a lot of the mainstream media is doing the best that they can with the information that they get. But I think if you want more of I wouldn't say more of a factual view, but if you just want to see how scared you should be, how panicked you should be, I think your best choice is to go to the resources I said, so the World Health Organization, CDC, local public health departments and such. I think they're going to give you a better picture. But of course, the news is also bringing personal stories into it and creating a narrative about this too, so I don't necessarily think it's bad to watch the news either, but I know myself, and I even study this, right? I can't, there's only so much news about this that I can take before feeling overwhelmed myself. And so what I like about the CDC and the WHO is they just kind of lay it out there, and this is what it is. And so I find it very helpful.
Awesome. Those are incredible resources. I have an episode planned here soon to talk to someone who's in the news, and I'm going to ask her about how they fact check and how we can fact check. So I definitely will dive more into that soon. But based on what you have studied and your expertise and the research you've done, I have a few myths or facts I want to throw at you and ask if you have an answer for us. Because I've heard a lot. The first one is just, have you heard the thing about the ibuprofen? People are saying, don't take ibuprofen.
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I was actually curious about that too, because I would say, so originally where that came from was the French Ministry of Health. I believe they were citing one research paper, and that's what they were using. But I know a lot of people like the CDC and the WHO, who again are credible sources, they said there's not enough evidence to back that up. Like I said, it was one paper, and in terms of the scientific community, that's not necessarily enough. But I think it is, something that should be researched more, just because, especially if you understand, how your immune system works. So I'll give a brief synopsis, I suppose. Basically, when you get sick, your immune system has different ways to, one, stop the spread within your body, and two, to neutralize that pathogen or the virus or the bacteria or what have you, to basically kill it, right, to get rid of it. So for the first step, to stop the spread of it going through your body, what your body does is it gets inflamed, right? And basically what that means is you are making it harder, you're creating more barriers for that pathogen to travel. And that sometimes causes fever and stuff like that. But what ibuprofen does is it lowers inflammation, so it stops swelling from happening. Now, that is good for a lot of things, like headaches and migraines, and it may not be good for certain things like having a virus, depending on how the virus travels and stuff. So if you think about it like that, I think, it's definitely something to look into more. But again, I don't think there is credible evidence out there yet. Hopefully they get some, but from what I can tell from the WHO and the CDC, ibuprofen is fine to take. Just always consult with your doctor.
My understanding of the immune system primarily comes from watching Osmosis Jones, so I appreciate you explaining it a little further, because there's a lot where you're like, I'm an adult, I can name all 50 states, right? And then you're like, wait, can I name them all? So having a little extra science lesson right now in something we're not experts in, appreciate it muchly.
Okay, good.
Do you want to talk to the thing that people keep saying, which is if you drink water, it will wash the virus into your stomach and you'll be fine?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. See, I haven't heard that one before. That's interesting. The answer is no.
Okay.
That's hilarious, though. So the reason, this also gives me a chance to be a bit more humble in my science knowledge, so I also appreciate this. But so basically, human anatomy, you can think about, you have two different tubes in your throat, in your neck, right? One for just air, right, which is your trachea, and then one for your liquids, your food, that sort of thing. That's your esophagus, right? So there's two separate tubes, and I knew that. Yeah, of course. Right, you have a valve that basically is like, oh, okay, you're breathing, so I'm going to shut one of the tubes. Oh, you're eating, you're drinking. All right, I'll shut the other tube. Right. So it's a very regulated system, and that's why you don't get food in your lungs. Right. And so the virus, it goes through with the trachea, goes down into your lungs that way, and that's how it infects the lungs. And honestly, if it did somehow, go through the esophagus and get into your stomach acid is a very powerful force. The pH, which basically says how acidic or basic it is, the pH in your stomach is like 1 or 2, which means it's very, very acidic, and it basically kills anything in its path. And so most likely if the virus did end up getting in the stomach, it would just be neutralized, to say the least.
Did you just call my stomach basic?
No, I didn't. I called it acidic, actually. There you go.
That's better. And it's hard for me to ask these questions without laughing, because I don't want to laugh at people. But I just, there's a lot of them where I'm like, no, that's a good point. I should look into that. Like there's a lot where I'm like, wow, I hadn't known that about science or this or that. But the water one, I was like, okay, I don't know a lot, but I know that that's not a thing. Like, it feels like something that if you were 4 years old, your parents would tell you, and then you'd be like, I'm calling your bull here, Mom.
Yeah, definitely.
So that one was confusing, and maybe I'm not understanding what they meant, but I've seen that one quite a few times now. But I think the important takeaway from that, which is maybe when you're a 4-year-old and your mom tells you that, is that drinking water is good. And any way that you can trick yourself into drinking water, I am pro.
Oh, yeah. That. No, I mean, not to mention, too, with COVID-19. Even if you do get it, you need to be very heavily hydrated anyways. So, yes.
Yeah, and this one maybe you can or cannot talk to, but people are saying that you should test yourself every morning by trying to hold your breath for 10 seconds.
Where are you finding that?
Girl, I got some conspiracy theories for days.
Are you just like going down in the deep dark web? It's like,
no,
I have never heard of this one.
Oh my gosh,
wow.
I wish I had to look hard to find these things. No, okay. What I will say about this is, at first I was like, yeah, that makes sense, and then I thought about it and I was like, okay, if you are a young person, or let's say healthy person, if you're relatively healthy and you can hold your breath for 10 seconds, you might still have COVID-19 but be asymptomatic, so it's possible that that's not a helpful indicator. And if you are someone who's not healthy or is elderly, you might not be able to hold your breath for 10 seconds, and that doesn't mean that you have COVID-19. But I think it's one of those, like, I don't know, false positive things where, like, remember in Inception, he has the top that he spins, and if the top doesn't fall, that means he's in a false reality. But, like, if the top does fall, it doesn't mean he's not in a false reality. It just means that, so, like, here's the thing, if the top falls, it doesn't mean you are or are not in a false reality. But if the top never falls, it means you probably are not in the real reality. So I think the 10-second holding your breath thing could be that if you normally can hold your breath for 10 seconds and now you can't, maybe get checked, but don't panic if you can't hold your breath for 10 seconds. And just because you can hold your breath for 10 seconds doesn't mean you don't have it. So, I don't know. Does that make sense? That the takeaway is if you normally can and now you can't, that's the only helpful way that test matters?
Well, so, I mean, here's the thing, right? First of all, I think your analysis on that was spot on.
Thank
right?
you. I am an expert in movie trivia.
You brought up a great point with being asymptomatic and still having the virus. 100% you're right. And I think the only thing, if you want to hold your breath in the morning for 10 seconds, I'm not telling you can't, you have that autonomy to yourself. But I think you know this too, because I actually have also had bronchitis, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, and I also have asthma, so it was even more scary. You notice when you're shortness of breath. When you have shortness of breath, you notice. It's not like you don't notice it.
Yeah.
Because normally breathing is just so easy, right? It's just like second nature. But when you can't breathe as well, it's really noticeable. So,
even when I visit a place with high altitude, I notice it so fast. And I also notice how quickly I get tired. Mm-hmm. Like, you feel really different when you can't breathe, or you feel like kind of foggy headed, or it's not like you wake up and can't hold your breath more than 8 seconds and then you're like, oh, I should get tested.
Yeah, and too, it's not about holding your breath, it's about breathing in and out, right? So, like, I can't, I had bronchitis, 4 years ago. I would say the hardest part wasn't holding my breath in. It was just breathing in and out, right? Getting enough oxygen in and getting carbon dioxide out. So it might be the case that you can hold your breath for 10 seconds anyways, and still have shortness of breath, even if you can do that, is my point.
Yeah, and I think, especially, like, if you're an athlete, when I was a long-distance swimmer, I could hold my breath a real long time. But maybe this is like the Inception analogy, where if you normally can and now you can't, perhaps a helpful test, or also another helpful test might be taking your own temperature, because I've heard that that's a big indicator. Is not, like with COVID-19, it's not that people are sneezing. It's what you were saying, it's the cough and the fever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You might not be able to answer this, and that's okay. We might not have an answer right now, but are animals okay? Can we keep making out with our dogs? Or...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no evidence to support that your dog we'll get coronavirus. And mainly that's because it's really hard for viruses to jump from animals to humans or humans to animals. They have to undergo a lot of mutations, or even just the right mutation in order to do that. So, and I've seen that around too. But from what I've seen, no, your dog will not get sick from COVID-19 as of this moment.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about people who are saying the virus is mutating so quickly, and that like we're learning new stuff every day, and people were saying that like you're fine if you're young or you're healthy, but now people are saying, oh no, it's mutated and young healthy people are being infected. So I guess you were mentioning the World Health Organization and other sources of fact and that they have the best updates. So maybe those are the places to look when we start to wonder if it's mutated or not.
Yeah, I mean, I did see reports that from a university in China that they had discovered a new strain of COVID-19. A new strain meaning that the current COVID-19 virus has mutated. They found that evidence, and apparently the new mutated strain was more deadly, which, like I said before, that could mean that it's not able to spread as much and as quickly as the original one. But that's all I've seen about a new strain. It wouldn't surprise me if this virus were to keep mutating and things. That's kind of like, in a sense, it's kind of what viruses do. So
I mean, that's what we do. We evolve. Right. We all adapt. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised, and but again, it's just keeping up with information and things. But it's important to know too that even if the virus does mutate, maybe it's one mutation or maybe two, you should still practice the same safety measures that are currently in place, anyways.
Do we know? I've heard that this is like chicken pox where you can only get it once. Do we have enough to say that that's true or not? That like if you get COVID-19 and then you recover, you're now okay? I actually haven't seen any evidence for that. Personally, I haven't seen it on CDC or WHO. Now, when you do get COVID-19 virus and you recover, you have an immune system now to that virus, right? So that's good. You might not get that same virus. But again, like we just talked about, this virus can mutate, and even if it's one mutation, your immune system is very, very specific and selective, and one mutation could possibly make your immune system not fight that virus, and so you might get sick all over again. So it's definitely possible. Basically, we just don't know yet, but I haven't seen any evidence for that myself. Do you have any facts on how long it lives on surfaces? There's tons of different numbers out there, right? At the end of the day, what it really is that it depends on the temperature of the surface. It depends on the humidity. It depends on the type of surface and that sort of thing. From what I could see, the most, at maximum, the virus can survive for 1 to 2 days on a surface. But from what I can see, it's usually on glass or metal. Otherwise, again, depending on temperature and things, it can usually stay on the surface for, 4 hours or 9 hours, something around those range. But it seemed like, from what I can see, the most is 1 to 2 days. And of course, the research is constantly evolving, but as of right now, from what I can see, the maximum is 1 to 2 days. So then how would you say that people should stay safe right now?
In terms of the surfaces, at least, you gotta disinfect a lot of the most used surfaces in your house. And usually you want to use at least a 70% alcohol solution to really disinfect it. That would be my advice in terms of the surfaces. I mean, I've been cleaning my apartment a lot, mainly because I'm bored, but also because it's very good for very good for stopping. But more generally, right, and I'm sure you've heard about this too, is just to wash your hands for 20 seconds. And really, the thing is you don't want to touch your face with unwashed hands. And the reason for that is because the only way the virus can get into your body and infect you is through open entry points, meaning your mouth, your nose, your ears, your eyes. That's the only way the virus can get inside you and start infecting you, right? So if you don't wash your hands and you touch your face, it's easy for the virus to get in.
Stay out of your orifices, people. You've been so respectful and kind, and listening to these questions and answering them, I feel like I have to confess something to you. This is horrible. I'm just going to lose all my viewers. But I hate washing my hands, Nova. Here's the thing. I'm doing it. I am doing it so much, and it's making me understand a little more of what living with, like, germophobia or OCD would be. Because when I had to travel through the airport, it was like, oh my gosh, I just took money from the cashier after I ordered my food, got to go wash my hands. Like, I'm washing my hands more than I have in the last 20 plus years. And here's the thing. If I, who hate washing my hands, can do it, people, you can do it. But I do. I don't know what it is. And maybe it's a temperature thing. I don't like being cold. I don't like when water's cold. But I hate it. I hope you can still love me. It's okay if you need time, and I'm sure you're glad you're talking to me on the telephone. But it bothers me so much to have my hands be cold and wet.
Well, really, you should be washing your hands with warm water.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. And I like to do that, but sometimes when you're in a bathroom, it's an automatic thing and you can't control it and it's too cold. But I will tell you, when we were going through the airport, it was scalding hot. Like, I was like, I don't even know if I can last 20 seconds because this is dangerously hot. So city officials are like, no, burn the people. Let's get this virus off.
Wow. Yeah. Well, do you know the science of why washing your hands with soap is better than sanitizer?
I do not, but I did see a video where a kid put soap on his hand and touched water that had pepper in it, and all the pepper ran away. And then I saw them do it with hand sanitizer and nothing happened.
That does, like, reviews on Shirley Temples or something?
Probably. I'm not familiar with his library of work. But it did look very effective, and it did make me want to wash my hands and drink water to get the virus down my throat.
Oh, good. I'm glad you've learned something from what I've been saying. Well, I with the episode with my sister Aaliyah, she mentioned that I explained the science. So if you want me to, I can.
So why is soap more effective than hand sanitizer? Yes, which I also hate. I hate hand sanitizer, girl. I do not like that either. I am very au natural. However, I also am a crazy person who likes essential oils, so I probably should just not talk. But I also am a healthy person, so if you need Western medicine and it exists, I'm so happy that you have it, and when I need it, I will take it.
That's great. That's great to hear, Kim.
Yeah. I'm going to put on, while we talk, I have some hand sanitizer I'm going to put on right now as you tell me about why soap is important.
Okay. This virus, it's an enveloped virus, which basically means it's surrounded by a layer of lipid proteins.
Oh, those are fatty. Those are fatty proteins, right?
Yeah, there you go. Fatty proteins. Exactly. Good job. Points for Kat. So we know that about the virus, right? So then ask you, let's say you're cooking, right? You're cooking.
I would never, but okay.
Let's just pretend you're making like some Mediterranean food or Italian food, right? And you're using olive oil.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And you get olive oil on your hand, and you're like, darn it, man. But what do? You don't just put your hand with oil on it under the water. Why? Because it's not going to get the oil off, right?
Well, I would go, Mamma Mia, very slippery. Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you use to get the oil off your hand?
I lick it off.
Oh, okay. Well, don't do that. No, but you would use soap, right? You would use soap, mainly because soap allows water to bind to the fat, essentially, and be able to wash it off of your hands, to get it off your hands. So when, let's say you still have that olive oil on your hand, right, and you use soap, you're able to get the olive oil off your hand with some water and some soap, right? Same thing applies to the virus, right? If you don't use soap and you just use water, the virus is going to stay on your hand, just like olive oil is, right? So you need to use soap so that the water can bind to those fat and be able to get that virus actually off of your hands.
I'm imagining like when you have like Play-Doh stuck somewhere and you can't get Play-Doh off with like a paper towel, you need to use other Play-Doh to get that Play-Doh off. There are specific things that work with different... It sounds like soap is the thing and not paper towels.
Definitely use... you know what? Whatever analogy works for you, you can do it. But essentially, the soap allows the virus to get off of your hands so that they're free of the virus. And the reason why you want to wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds is because you really want to make sure that the soap has enough time to do its magic, and also that you're getting every surface on your hands so that you can get rid of the virus. Now, the hand sanitizer, it works at... It works at rendering the virus ineffective, in a sense, but the virus particles are still on your hand.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
What does that mean if the virus particles are still on your hand? That like you are more likely to be able to give them to someone else, or it can still affect you?
No, it's just that we'd rather not have any virus on our hands at all. And also sanitizer, you need a certain amount in order to kill it effectively. And if you're not using enough of the sanitizer, it won't kill it, which means, the virus might still be active and you might spread it to other people. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about masks as far as people who have the mask over their face? I've heard that the mask doesn't necessarily stop you from getting it. The masks are mostly so you don't give viruses to other people in general.
Yep, that's 100% right. And I would say right now, the people who need masks are our healthcare workers.
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do to, if you don't want to get COVID-19, there is an easy solution. And I'll tell you what, it's cheaper than getting a mask. And basically, it's staying at home. I mean, seriously, right?
Dr. Nova prescribes one staycation.
I mean, those masks need to go to people who are really on the front lines of this pandemic and who are being exposed to this virus every day, and they need to give the masks to the people who are sick to minimize that transmission. But ordinary people, really you should be staying home and saving those masks for the healthcare professionals.
So one thing that I've wondered about, whether this is a fact or not, is about a vaccine. I've heard that it probably takes 12 to 18 months to develop, and then I'm seeing, China has one that's coming out next month. Do we know anything about the reality of vaccines?
Yeah, so what the vaccine that you're referring to with the 12 to 18 months, that means what takes the longest in any kind of vaccine development that is not approved by the FDA is the clinical trial part of it, so the human trials, right? Making the vaccine in terms of, getting the right formula and being able to put it in a form that can be injectable, that doesn't take the longest part. The longest part is injecting humans as part of a trial and then seeing the after effects of that. And normally a clinical trial, you want a clinical trial to run for about a year to, first of all, make sure it's safe. We don't want to give any deadly vaccines to people. And also, you want to make sure it's effective. And that's why vaccines take so long to make. You can't just, it's not like the flu vaccine, right? Because the flu vaccine, we already kind of have a formula. We're just kind of, putting, adjusting the levels of things, right? This vaccine is a completely new vaccine, which means it needs to go through trials. It needs to go through human trials. So I actually did not see the China vaccine, but what probably is happening there is that they have a vaccine that is able to go to trial.
Okay.
Is probably what is happening there. Because I don't think that, there definitely needs to be, that extra safety net of following humans for a year to make sure that the vaccine is okay and it's working properly.
That makes more sense. My last myth or fact that I need you to bust is really important to me, and I heard that Domino's was going to be half off this weekend. Do you know if that is true, or should I not order pizza?
Do I know if Domino's is going to be half off? Is that what your question is?
Yes, I saw that spreading around a lot on social media that all of Domino's would be half off this weekend, and I didn't know if your research had given you any facts about that.
I've gotten emails about that as well.
Oh, so likely true.
Likely, yeah.
Okay, I'll look into that one myself. But I do still have my food here, so I probably will wait on that. But are there any myths that you wanted to bust?
Well, I think the biggest myth is that that this virus isn't a big deal. And I think that's one of the more damaging and dangerous myths out there. This COVID-19 pandemic, which by the way, is the highest level an outbreak can reach, is pandemic. Ebola was not a pandemic. To give you a frame of reference.
Is the correct term, it's an epidemic that it's spreading, and then pan means it's everywhere?
Yeah, essentially. Pandemic means it's essentially global. It's gone, across countries, and it's in multiple countries, multiple continents, that sort of thing, is what a pandemic is.
Okay.
So this is a very serious thing. And I'm sure you've seen this too on social media. Many people are saying this isn't as big of a deal as people are making out to be. It's fine. This will be gone in May. It's all going to be okay. And I think, without panicking too much, we need to come to a reality that this is a big deal. The U.S., our confirmed number of cases keep increasing every day, every hour, it seems like, right? But we're not even, we have a long way to go in terms of the amount of cases we will most likely see in the U.S. If you want to look at Italy is completely shut down, essentially. And I just read that, they're actually bringing their military in to help out. This is unprecedented. And even if you look at China, they were shut down too. This is something that we need to take very seriously. And if anything, what makes the U.S., I think, a bit more vulnerable to being overwhelmed by this is because of our healthcare system. Is we are just not equipped in terms of ICU beds, in terms of adequate personal protective equipment. We're just not prepared to handle this this sort of pandemic. We are not ready. We're not prepared, and I think that's a real danger. So if there's anything that, I think if anybody needs to take away from this episode, is just that this is a big deal. And if you don't treat it as something that is a big deal and that is very important to do your part, you need to try to do everything that you can to stop the spread of this virus, because it's not only going to affect you, it's going to affect your community, it's going to affect your state, it's going to affect the U.S., and it's going to affect the world. More than likely the world is not going to be the same. And it's crazy. And so I think the biggest myth is just that it's not a big deal, where it most definitely is.
Yeah, and there's no reason not to stay home this weekend, you guys. I heard Domino's was 50% off. So really, treat yourself, stay home. But yeah, I saw that image of social distancing explained, where it shows a bunch of matches and they're burned, and then it shows one match that's further away from the rest, and then the other matches haven't burned because they didn't have the connection of that one match who's socially distanced. And it's not convenient to be home. I know I'm trying to keep it light, but I'm losing at least 2 months of my income, which I don't have savings, so it is really scary. But it does kind of make me angry that I have to be without work longer because people are choosing to go out. And if you have to work, if you're a medical care provider, if your job is not letting you stay home, do what you got to do. I understand that that's serious and there are essential things that need to stay open. But if you're spring breaking and frolicking at clubs, that's kind of blowing my mind of the selfishness. I try to remind myself, maybe they don't know, but I don't know how you don't know by now. So it's okay. Learn from Nova. Stay home. Do you want to give us, in your opinion, kind of a timeline, and this is assuming that people took it seriously. So everything you're saying is so important. Social distancing, stay in your home, guys, get your pizza, or you've already gotten your groceries at this point. I know you have, because the grocery store is empty. So what curve do we want to follow, and what country do you think right now is responding in an awesome way?
So I think in a timeline, if we don't do anything right now, so if we stay the status quo as of today, right now, Saturday, March 20th, 21st. If we don't
Today's the 21st, yeah.
If we just keep status quo, we're probably looking at August, September, October-ish.
What does that mean as far as there's no more cases, or we can go back to work, or
no, sorry, that's a good question. And I actually might take that back.
Okay.
Really, I've heard reports that this pandemic, at least with COVID-19 still circulating, it could last up to a couple years.
Okay.
I don't foresee anybody going back to work in terms of an office or a restaurant or something for a good while.
A good while, meaning this summer?
I don't want to be too specific, because the thing is, I just don't know. But
yeah,
I would say, I wouldn't be surprised if this went all the way to November.
Okay. Your understanding is better than mine, so I'm not, again, taking it as fact because you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm taking it as a better educated opinion because personally, I'm being told that I'll be back in my restaurant in April. And I'm kind of no, I don't think I will be. I don't think that's likely to happen. But in my mind, I'm okay, well, May?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a long haul, and the more that people, again, right, don't take it as seriously,
the longer
it's gonna be. And I'm sure you've seen the curves, right?
I got curves for days, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand the importance of, especially if I keep ordering this pizza, I'm going to have a lot of curves. No, but that's a really important thing is do you want to explain that? I know it's a bit more of a visual thing, but.
Honestly, you could Google and be like, curve versus flattening the curve, right? I mean, that's everywhere at the moment. But basically, you have this curve of an epidemic, of an outbreak, of a pandemic, and it basically, as time goes by, the number of cases increase, right, up into a certain point where you reach the peak of the curve, so the very, very top of the curve, and then it starts to kind of go back down in terms of the cases, and this is, of course, all over time.
I'm showing a visual as you talk, so what she's talking about is like if we were all exposed right now, we'd be up here, and we have this number of hospital beds, so we want to prolong how long it takes to be exposed if you have to be exposed. So the curve that we want to follow is this flat thing where so say that 100% of people got it, we'd be up here, there's not enough hospital beds and care. But if 100 people got it, but it's spread out over, say this is the number of days, you can take care of people better. But the idea is we don't want 100 people to get it. But if people are going to get it, if you can limit the number of people who get it every day, you can provide them with care without having to provide for 100% of people, in a basic example.
Yeah, so you want to try to flatten that curve so that you give time for healthcare workers to actually treat the amount of patients that have COVID-19. The problem is, and I'll tell you this, we're nowhere near the peak yet.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm beginning to understand.
Yeah, we are nowhere near, and it's really sad because the more that we don't do things, the more that we don't flatten out this curve, not only is our health system going to be completely overwhelmed, but at the end of the day, more people are going to die.
Yeah, we're going to lose people.
That is a very sad fact. It's very, very sad.
Well, especially because a lot of those people aren't doing anything. It's people who are staying home, and then the people who are going out are then going to bring it back to those people. And if you're elderly or if you're immunocompromised and you are following all the guidelines, it's really tragic that people who are going out for pleasure are putting those people at risk.
Yeah.
But it sounds like a lucrative time to be a podcaster. So it's like there's a lot you can do from home and get creative. And, if you are a server like me or you are in a job that just got slashed, I don't know, guys. Let's file for unemployment. Let's try to get creative. But let's worry about what we're going to do after we worry about saving lives. So,
and too, you asked what country is doing a really good job right now, and I think the answer is South Korea and Taiwan. They're doing really, really good job. South Korea, in particular, is doing broad-based testing. So, like in the U.S. and in Italy, because we know Italy is kind of under lockdown at the moment, when they test people, they're only testing people who are symptomatic, right, who have symptoms. Mm-hmm. So when you look at their numbers, it's mostly people that are, 45 or older, because those are the people showing symptoms. What's interesting about South Korea is that because they're doing a broad-based testing, which means they're basically testing everybody, whether you have symptoms or not, and what they're finding is that the largest amount of people who have the virus are those between the ages of 20 and 29 who don't have symptoms. So what does this mean? That means that even though we're just testing people who have symptoms, our numbers are way off in terms of confirmed cases because so many people don't have symptoms.
Do you know, so say that, like, I, Kat, could be asymptomatic. I was exposed to people within the last 5 days because I went to the grocery store. So say I went to the grocery store, I picked something up, I'm asymptomatic, now I'm on lockdown, I'm in my own home. How long would I be asymptomatic before I recovered from COVID-19? Do we know that?
I don't think we do know that.
The number I'm hearing right now is 2 weeks. So they're saying quarantine yourself for 2 weeks. Is that just a good safety measure, or is there anything backing that right now if people are asymptomatic?
I think 2 weeks, that's just come with, I think within from my understanding, they got the 2 weeks from, because that is basically how long it takes the virus to replicate in the large quantity of numbers in order to infect people. So after the 2 weeks are done, then the virus may not be replicating, meaning you might not be able, you might not transmit it to other people. But I mean, here's the thing though. I don't think that there's enough evidence out there to say it's definitive.
Yeah.
Viruses are little tricky buggers, They don't have any feelings, right? They are basically hijacking, your cellular machinery, as we like to call it. They're basically hijacking it and saying, this is ours now. And they're using it to replicate themselves. So I wouldn't be surprised if it would be longer than 2 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think 2 weeks is a pretty good guideline. But again, that doesn't mean anything about a virus on a surface, right? You'd be in your house for 2 weeks and then go outside once and touch a surface that has the virus and have it infect you again. You know what I mean?
Say that, is that why people are saying you were mentioning disinfecting your own home? Like right now, I don't think I have it. I could be asymptomatic, but do I need to disinfect my own home from myself?
Yeah, I think you should definitely disinfect your home. Yeah. I mean, even I went to the store today, right? I disinfected my cart or whatever, but I was touching, the cereal that I got today, right? I was touching that container. Who else had touched that container? Even though the stores are being really, really good about disinfecting, you never know, right? So let's say I touch that cereal box, and the cereal box, let's say, has COVID-19 on the box. Well, then, I was touching other things too in the store, right? As you do, as you look at the nutrition facts, right? So I might be inherently, moving that virus around. And then let's say I check out, right? I go to my car and I drive my steering wheel. Well, that hand that might have the virus is now on my steering wheel, right? And then I drive home.
Yeah, I mean, it's back to your cooking with oil example, except that we don't feel slimy. You don't feel the virus on you. So you could have that oil, and until you wash your hands with soap, that's still there, and it's not going away just by brushing your hands off on your clothes or hand sanitizer.
Yeah, so, the point is you are touching so many different things that you don't even realize, and that's why everybody should be, disinfecting their house and making sure it's clean, because you never know.
Well, I think you've given a very truthful look into this, but also in a calming way. So I appreciate you listening to everything today and giving us some background and some science information, since clearly we all have a long way to go on understanding what's not our field. But I wanted to ask about what you have seen that's been positive, if you have any story that you want to share that's made you happy and has helped you retain some sanity right now.
I would say, at least here in Madison, they've started up a lot of volunteering opportunities in the sense where there's a lot of elderly people who are feeling lonely being in the house. And so all you have to do is you basically call them and you chat with them and you see how they're doing. And so, you're being social from a distance.
Adopting a grandparent.
Yeah, it's very cute. So I thought that was a really creative idea of, talking to the people who really should be staying at home all the time. But again, that might be really lonely. So I really like to hear that. I've also seen that our carbon emissions have kind of gone down a lot, which is great to hear, because I am a big climate change person as well. So that's really interesting. Maybe we can use this time to change our economy for the better, but that might be too wishful thinking. Who knows? I think, at the end of the day, what really, really, really warms my heart is that people are starting to realize how important public health is, which really is great because as a student in public health, my cohort here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we have felt it. We're a lot of times we're just not taken seriously because we're public health, because we're not, actually working in hospitals and things, which, of course, hospital workers, healthcare workers are very important to our health system, but, public health is all about being preventative and seeing health in a holistic manner. So if anything, this pandemic has really shown how important public health is and how we should invest in public health more so that we are more prepared for things like this. Another thing for public health too is that there are what we call social determinants of health, meaning health isn't just being free from disease. There's many factors contributing to your health. So, for example, as I'm sure you've experienced, when you don't have a job or you don't have a good income, that affects your health, right?
I mean, even being able to buy produce, like the cheapest stuff is really unhealthy at the grocery store. And
right.
That's...
Yeah. But, I mean, in order to live, to be able to, to live everyday life, you need a certain amount of income, right? That you need that in order to buy produce, buy food, but also, to have affordable housing, to have some shelter, to not have to worry about stress as much because at least you have an income, right?
It's expensive to go to a therapist, getting mental health, and then if you need any kind of medication past that, like you can so easily, like a hit can really topple your world if you can't have the money to buy in bulk and to stock up, and losing a little bit of hours makes a huge difference when you work hourly.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, and I think also people are just realizing that, wow, I never thought about this. I don't know. I've never thought about how important it is for me to, go to a coffee shop and chill there. I never realized how important that is for my mental health, or I never realized this. And I think it's an important thing to see. Because basically, this is public health. And people don't know it very well, but this is public health, right? We are trying to convince people, essentially, that being healthy means that you have a good income, you have affordable housing, right? You are able to live in an environment where you can breathe clean air, where you can see some green space, right? Where you live in a safe area without crime, right? Those are all the things that I think are coming out right now from this pandemic. So if there's any lessons to be learned, it's that give public health a chance, trust public health professionals, and just give us some freaking funding already, please, so that we can do our work.
Well, we only think about health when we're not healthy, and I know that's true of me, even talking about how, like, it annoys me to wash my hands. Like, that's a privilege that I don't have to think about getting sick that often, because I have a pretty good immune system, apparently, that I don't get help. But since I have, in the last 6 years, been working in a restaurant, I have never been in my whole life sick as often as I am now. And it is because I'm in contact with so many people so often, and it's totally different than when you're kind of in your own office cubicle, or you're in your own small classroom. But yeah, coming in contact with people constantly. I have been sick a lot in the last few years, in minor ways, but whenever I'm sick, I'm like, with God as my witness, I will never be sick again. When I'm healthy, it's going to be all different, you guys. It's going to be amazing. But yeah, I mean, it's people don't think about all that teachers do, and if we would pay teachers more. But yeah, with health, it is something that you really do take for granted, and then when you are not well, it's like, oh my gosh, why did we not stock up on funding our health providers? I heard that you could volunteer to sew, like, face masks for hospitals. I don't know about that, but I'm hearing a lot about different ways that people are volunteering to take care of that right now. Also, I'm hearing a lot about, like, 3D printing, people who are trying to 3D print ventilators, like supplies that hospitals don't have, because they're running out, because we need to flatten the curve.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. I am looking forward to seeing more solidarity between humanity, in a sense.
Do you have any recommendations you want to do for people who are in quarantine right now to keep them busy with books or movies? Or I know that you gave up television for Lent, so I won't bring that up. But
that was a bad move.
God will forgive you. Watch some TV, girl.
I would say what I've started to do is I've actually started to journal in the morning, and you can journal at night too. But there's just so much going on, at least in my head, with everything about this pandemic, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about a lot of different things and how this is impacting their life. And I've noticed that if I just write it down, it becomes a lot more clear, because I have to think about what I'm going to write down, how it's going to be organized, and that just makes me feel a lot less overwhelmed, because, like, okay, I have it written down, it's right there, it's not as bad as I think, I can do this, I can, move on with my day. So in terms of mental health, I think that's, for me at least, that's what's been working well for me. And I know some places are, are kind of like shelter in place at the moment, but in the areas where they're not 100% stuck to their house, you can still go outside, go for a walk, go on a hike or something. Just, again, make sure that you stay 6 feet away from people. You might want to bring some hand sanitizer as a quick fix, and some disinfecting wipes in case. But you should stop and smell the roses without all of the air pollution because of all the stupid emissions in the U.S. So, who knows when we're going to get clean air again, That's my thought.
Yeah, I am thinking about lessons I can take from this into life in the future, and I think talking about the journaling or just, like, doing puzzles together is something I talked about with another guest, and that's, like, how we should live, because it is easy to just come home and Netflix and zone out, but as we're learning from this, we're so connected to the world, and I think, like, you were talking about health overall, and so this is a physical health problem right now, but I think it's also shedding a big light on, like, mental health, as far as we shouldn't live like we're quarantined all the time after this, And if you're noticing right now that your life's not changing that much while being in quarantine, maybe this could be a wake up. Talking to myself, like, do take advantage of health when you have it, and things that make you happy outside of just temporary fixes of watching television, and live the kind of life that gets you outside and connecting with other people, because that's really meaningful.
Couldn't agree more with that.
Well, love to all listening. Please go ahead and answer the question that I started this with, which was questions that you have about the virus. And if she has it within her to answer them, Nova might check some of those out, or I might compile them and send them over to her. And if she hasn't gotten too exhausted with me and my nonsense, we might do a follow-up of giving some of those answers. But she did give amazing resources to check out the World Health Organization and the CDC and such. So a lot of your answers are there. But keep taking care of yourself. Take care of others as you're able. Wash your hands. Stay home. Thank you for listening. Nova, do you want to have the final meow?
Do I have to do the actual meow, or?
I'll let you interpret that how you like.
Okay. Well, it was a pleasure being on here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nova. Meow.